Hey everyone, welcome to Expansion Cast. Expansion Cast is a magical podcast I created so people could find simple or unconventional solutions to expand their personal awareness and experience. This podcast is dedicated towards revealing people's divine truth and how that divine truth works its way out into the world, one by one, helping liberate each of us on our personal path to freedom. If you love this podcast, please give us a rating and share. First of all, Farren, I want to welcome you to Expansion Cast. I have been sitting here and feeling into the session today and feeling what's going to come up. And first of all, I want to tell you, you look amazing. I've never seen you wear a shirt like that before. You look great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, Farren, let's start off with, who are you? And not like the business sense of who this Farren is, but who really are you?
That's a very interesting question. Who am I? I almost want to answer it as in, well, I don't know how to answer that. I could answer it in a way that says I'm a being of observation, mm-hmm. Or I could answer that as from a standpoint of what I do. But I'm going to go with, I want to go with I'm a being of observation of the truth that exists in all of us and recognizes what kind of reality we're creating for ourselves.
So, does that mean that what gets you fired up and what gets you up every day is finding truth and seeking truth and sharing that truth with others?
Yes. My world, the way that it functions in my own internal reality, has had so much, I could go all the way back to, I guess, what really drives me, right, has driven me from the beginning. I can't even say from the beginning, but what I recognized after exploring, following what I really wanted to do in my life with just life itself and ending up in places that I never really planned to or expected to. I always felt like I was like the bridge of all of these different pods of people. And, growing up, we see a lot of different constructs of groups and identities in our, in our social environment when we're trying to identify with ourselves. And I just go back to that time where I wanted to just be a part of all of the identities and not see them as any different or feel like that sense of belonging to all of them, but not seclude any of them. So I've always kind of seen myself as being a little bit almost like an observer now that I look back, like an observer of the things going on in my world from more of a detached place. And which helped me, I could have gone the traditional route and gone to university and created some form of pathway going down that construct of, I did want to be a veterinarian. I wanted to help animals. But travel called and the West Coast called, and in that came more diversity and more constructs of a variety of people that I was able to connect to. I guess along all of that, there's been a pretty strong understanding or exposure to just understanding life from a more holistic standpoint. I've had family that have been in that more in that reality since I was young. But my sense of adventure, I think, more so took me to the experiences that I did get to have leading into all of the, I'm going to say, mountains and valleys. When I finally found, it was like I came to a place when I was in Whistler. I started doing yoga at my staff accommodation. There was a teacher there that taught power yoga. And I was literally just doing it because I was an avid mountain biker and my body just needed something so that I wasn't going to hurt myself. And then time goes on and I end up in the Queen Charlotte Islands on a fishing lodge. That opportunity pulled me away from Whistler, but it also pulled me into the practice of yoga, and a friend that got me that job out on the island of Langara, which is magical. There's 2 points. One was the creative element, the creation of how I manifested that experience and how it became more than what I had even anticipated or more than what I had actually asked for. So I had always said, I want a place, that I can live and work at so I can create the freedom of being in that position.
So everybody's going to wonder what happened? Like, was there a transformation, or can you share that? Like, what was this event?
Well, for going to the island.
Yeah.
So, well, sort of. There was a mini transformation in there. So I had actually gone to Scotland. So going back to the timelines, there's so many. I can't even really. It's hard to track my timelines and where I ended up when. Mm-hmm. But I did end up going to Scotland for I would say 8 months to a year. And had hoped going into that I would be able to save money. So that was my biggest thing. I wanted to save money so that I could travel more. I could just do what I want. Freedom is that's like my core value, is to create freedom. And at that time, I didn't really name it freedom, or I didn't really call it that. It was just something in me that knew that I wasn't meant to just be stagnant or to stay in one place at any given time. And I found myself over a span of 3 to 5 years, I was in one place for maybe 3 to 4 months. So that first year, however, I was in Scotland for that 8 months. That was when I was 18. So I had gone from Whistler. I had wanted to become a vet, and the only natural animal clinic that I could find was in New Zealand at the time, weirdly enough. So I really wanted to go to New Zealand, but I had this idea that if I went to Scotland, had that experience, and saved the pound, mm-hmm. It would translate into New Zealand dollars like triple the amount, and I was going to be set. But of course, life doesn't always work out as planned. However, it still maneuvered itself in a way that I created experiences that I needed and evolved from them. But I did come back from Scotland, and then I went back to Whistler, and then I went to the Queen Charlotte's. And that summer was me going there. It was the manifestation of what I had asked for when I went to Scotland, wanting to work in a live-in kind of situation. But when I was in Scotland, I had heard that there wasn't really any positive experiences that came out of that kind of situation. So when I ended up getting this job at the fishing lodge, it was exactly that, but it was so much more amazing living on the ocean, being able to watch the whales. I got to salmon fish and be literally in like a magical vortex for a whole summer and get paid to be there, which then catalyzed my next opportunity, which was to take my chakra yoga training, teacher training, which was actually after my second summer at the Queen Charlotte's. So yeah, so I guess where I'm going with that is that I created in the earlier times of my life, like there wasn't really I didn't have a really clear idea on what I wanted to be or who I really was. I was more so following the inclination of how I was going to create the most magical and, I'm going to say, profitable experience doing what I love to do and being in really beautiful locations while I'm doing it. And then it evolved slowly as I started doing my own yoga practice in the Charlottes the summer previous. And then the following summer is when the opportunity for the yoga training came about. And it was just kind of a natural evolution. Somebody had mentioned the program, and I didn't even know what a chakra was. But I just felt like a really strong pull to entertain this school called the Pyramid Yoga Center. And yeah, I guess I tell, when I tell a story to people, I always say, I came into my chakra yoga training and so many different aha moments came through that experience when I just showed up, and life just kind of prepared me for that experience. I paid cash for my training, everything kind of lined up accordingly. And what it also did was it opened up a whole bunch of cans. It opened up a whole bunch of vortexes of stories, and I didn't understand at the time the depth of that undertaking when it comes to exploring the chakra system and becoming a teacher, becoming a leader through embodiment, and then going through, after I had spent some time in Thailand, the second time I went there. There's a long story. I'm going to try to keep it fairly summarized, but the second time I had gone to Thailand was when I dove really deep into the practices, but I wasn't balancing it with real life application and sharing what I had already learned, which kept me in an internal spiral. And then I came back to Canada and had to integrate where I had been living for 8 months back into this type of environment. So I went through, I say it's like a 2-year dark night of the soul when I came back to try to integrate all of the information I was receiving and that I had learned, and also all of the internal dialogue and trauma that was coming up at the time. So over the construct of a few years, it's been a healing process. I've been now in the same place for 12 years, which is crazy, and I never thought I would end up here. But all I really wanted to do through it all was teach yoga and understand the philosophy of life through movement and through embodiment. And music is my catalyst, being able to create and be an artist of creating a journey through music for people, and bring across concepts of how to understand a construct of thinking through the embodiment of movement, and where I direct people in that theme or in that intention. So right. Yeah, it's been a journey, and it's been a rough one for sure, going through the process of transformation. But
yeah, so what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom is such an internal game that I'm learning. It's more about how much control I think I have with the things I can't control.
So can you give us an example? Like what in your life maybe has offered you the most freedom?
Oh man, movement. Yeah, and it gives me permission when I'm in a dance or I'm in a creative process, and I let myself go there. That the freedom is there, but the true freedom is when I actually let myself express that with other people, and move past the self-limiting, we'll say, barriers or constructs that do come up when I think that what I am or who I am or how I'm expressing that isn't going to be accepted or is it going to be understood. So the freedom comes when I express anyways, and then I start to see how it's transforming people. So that's one element of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, then I'm still working on the whole financial gain.
Yeah.
Because that is a huge piece to be able to do and go and do the things that I really want to do and affect the people that I want to affect. But there's been a lot of, like, I guess, weaving the understanding of the internal game and how it's reflecting in the external and finding the balance between the practical and the spiritual.
Yeah. So would you say there's shadows in there that you have to work on to help you get to your freedom?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely. I'm feeling like it's coming from the root of giving myself the permission to express who I truly am,
mm-hmm.
and not be afraid of that girl inside or that person inside that just, like, when her heart sings and when she's passionate about something or when she's just in her zone of creation, of creativity, and then being able to anchor that in so that the financial elements can become something more ecstatic and useful, as opposed to being difficult and obstructive and limiting, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in that creativity. Yeah.
So is that your biggest block right now, or your biggest hurdle is to allow yourself your ultimate freedom and however it shows up, and in that space, let go of an old limitation around money so that it can just start to flow in and support you in your authentic space? Is that accurate?
Yes, I think my main problem with, I think this, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, is
nope, you're all alone. It's just you.
Maybe it's just me. Is spending more than what I'm bringing in. So, and it's not just on anything. Like there is a part of me that just wants to give so much. Like, for me to not be able to support people when they think they can't do something that would be beneficial to them. There's one part in that I definitely have learned to understand, is that there's a time and a place for, and how that support is given. It can create an enabling situation, and to discern the difference between when I want to give something, making sure I'm not trying to save them from something. And then, so that's one piece of it. And so the next part, like when it's not saving somebody from something, but just knowing that I have the ability to give in order to help them evolve in the direction that they need, then that creates, to me, that creates a form of purpose in some respects. And so when I am spending a lot of my investment, I'm going to say what I'm investing a lot in is on outside influences that I think can help me create some form of structure and systemization for what I'm doing. So I want to translate that as like, this is kind of like the masculine energy. Like the banks of the river, it has a place for that water to flow. And that part, I feel like there's so much femininity in my expression, but there's also a form of masculinity that is more directive, and it needs focus, and it needs some form of like some sort of like, I'm going this direction, and we can weave in and out through that, but to hold strong and steady in that focus, the systemization of what I'm trying to get across, there's a piece in there that I'm still working on healing or learning to use in a way that's not going to derail me from my creativity. So when I reach out and I invest in, say, coaches or people who I think have the system, and I see them succeeding with their system, it may or may not be my system, but I'm in the process right now where I'm looking for that construct, and therefore I'm being asked to consistently review what part of me is asking for that and what it really needs.
Right. Sometimes what I do when I come up to a block like that is I will ask myself and maybe the universe, how am I denying this abundance to flow? What am I doing to deny it? And what is the old story inside me that's preventing me from accepting what's already coming to me, what's already there? Like, I mean, money is abundant. There's lots of it. And, when I'm not receiving, there's two things like for me that can happen. One is I'm blocking it with some sort of belief around money and secondly, is greed. Sometimes I'll start getting money and then I'll start getting greedy, and then all of a sudden it starts to slow down. So I find if I keep that doorway open and I just accept that, I have to do some work. I have to do some work to generate some money. I have to find my worth so that when somebody comes to me for a session and they offer me, I've had people say, can I give you an extra $300 for the session? And at one point, I would feel like no, because I didn't feel like what I gave them was worth that much money. But who am I to decide that? Why would I block that, right? Mm-hmm. So as soon as I started just being open and grateful for their experience to give me money or support me, it changed how money started flowing in. Mm-hmm. And now I don't see money as an object anymore. Now I see it more as like a fluid energy that moves in, and it has to go too. Like it has to keep moving in some way. Yeah.
It needs some form of purpose. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In order to fulfill that purpose or to move in that, the water along the banks of the river, where is it going? I agree. And there's a good point there about not deciding for other people what they can and can't afford. So I would make assumptions that the people I'm speaking to can't afford what I feel I'm worth or that I'm valuing in myself. And so first had to obviously recognize my own value, but then the minute I removed my judgment on whether they could or couldn't afford something, I also, they're going through the same battle with their own self-value. And if I were to decide for them that, or make an assumption that they could only afford, say, $5 instead of $50, I'm just creating that experience, that block for myself there, because I don't know. And more times than not, I will remove that once I was aware that's what I was doing. And people are more than happy to pay, or they will find ways that will help them receive the information or receive the guidance or the support. So yeah, it's also parallel, reflection in my own world when I'm asking other people to help me. I have to watch my assumptions on my own self-value and my own self-worth, that I may or may not need what I think I need because I'm just not recognizing or trusting myself.
Yeah.
But
the other
there
thing
is also,
the other thing that comes up for me too with money sometimes, and when it comes in, is if I have a client that comes in and they can't generally afford it, suddenly there's an old program that starts up for me. And if they can only afford to pay me half of my going rate, all of a sudden there's this feeling that, well, maybe that's what I'm worth. And that was an old thing that I would drop into quite easily. And making my value based on somebody else's ability to pay. And so that was one I had to recognize too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a quote, I don't know who it's from, but it's how you get paid in direct proportion to your value. Like you're, no matter what that is. So however you're determining your value, you will get paid in direct accordance to that, equal to that.
So how does this all flow into manifesting?
So
it's a big question.
I kind of want to reference that. It's funny how that kind of construct came up, or the memory of, thinking I want the desire in me to want a live-in working situation to save money in order to go to New Zealand. That like something, there had to be a motivation to create the dream or to create the desire of a scenario. And I didn't get it within, or the plate, like I didn't get it the place, and I didn't really get it in the time that I had thought that's what I was trying to create. And so I kind of forgot about it. I kind of forgot about that desire until I got asked to go to this live-in working situation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally asked for this. And even until I got there, I realized like I'm in my working holiday situation, getting paid to be in the most beautiful place. And this is like beyond what I had thought that would look like. That's why I couldn't really see it. I mean, I could see, but it was more created from like, this is what I think I need in order to create this over here. This like, money to go to school over in this other country that's going to cost me, double the amount if I did it in my own country. But there was something in me that wanted something initially, and then it created a construct of an idea, and then I let go of that idea, but life still kept creating something for me in the process. So I think that's the most, like, there's been so many more situations, but I feel like a lot of my manifestations are either so instantaneous, depending on the capacity of them, or they're like that situation where now that I understand, I'm creating my reality and my future in this very moment, in every single thought and feeling and construct of, belief systems that I have, and how I'm responding to what I'm even saying right now is creating my next moment. I as soon as I recognized that, how powerful that was, how powerful I was, I actually got really scared. And I got scared because I was afraid of my negative thoughts, thinking that they were going to create a negative experience. Because that's what, that's what we are taught. That, and it's not that that's untrue, because it is true, but I also wasn't recognizing my power to respond to those negative thoughts. So the idea of what I was manifesting, and the idea of these positive and negative thoughts are, you have to be, I was very optimistic. I'm still very optimistic being. It's just in my nature. So when I went into a negative space, that's when I really forgot the power of who I was in that more optimistic, positive space. But I had to drop into the negative and kind of explore that space. Unfortunately, it was not fun, but it happened because I wasn't acknowledging power correctly. I was afraid of the thought, but I was not acknowledging the fact that I had the power to choose differently. And I think that's what happens a lot when when we get scared, or when we're afraid of not knowing who we are or where we're going, or we get lost in the whole identity crisis process, is that we kind of lose the sense of ability, like understanding that we have the ability to make different choices, but getting ourselves into that place that we are manifesting and we are creating in every moment. But ultimately, it's the relationship we're having with ourselves in that creative process that's going to result in the reality that we see.
So how do we recognize, how do I explain this? When we're manifesting, say Farren, you say that I want to manifest a relationship, and this relationship, I would like it like this and like this and like this. And how do we recognize whether we're blocking that manifestation from coming? And how do we recognize, if it does start to come through, what is authentic and what is not?
Mm-hmm. I want to take that into reflection. When we have a desire, there's a reason for that desire. There's something in us that is yearning for some sort of connection, some sort of understanding, some form of safety and security, joy, bliss, whatever, wherever that desire is coming from. It's a construct of something about the relationship inside that we have taken on as we've developed the relationship with ourselves and others, and our belief systems around those pieces. So the desire comes, it may come from a place of true, pure, like this is the essence of who I am, and I can acknowledge myself when I look in the mirror to myself, and I can see her clearly, and I'm okay to see that outside of myself. And then there's those parts that we're really afraid about being in relationship to ourselves. So we desire safety or support or security from another to help keep us in that space of what we would recognize as safety or security. But there's a disconnect there because it's coming from a place of fear, or there's a piece that was filled from the outside or told about that relationship from the external that created the relationship dynamic inside. So when I say, I want this kind of relationship, I really would love, it's more like, how do I want to feel in my body when I'm in relationship to life? And if we can look at life every day and understand we're actually in relationship with not only everybody, every person, but everything, every animal, every particle of existence, and see it as a reflection of what's happening on the inside and how we're relating to our environment. I mean, I never, and I fought it for years, to be in relationship with Medicine Hat. to be in a relationship with the place that I found myself in. I was in full on resistance battle because I wanted to be in Thailand. I wanted, part of my psyche was like, I like myself better in Thailand. I don't like myself where I am. But that wasn't the dialogue that I was using at the time. It was just like this internal resistance that was like, I didn't ask for this. I don't want to be here in this place where it was not the jungle. It was pure desert. There was nobody was like me here. I'm never going to find a relationship here. Like nobody knows who this person is who was just in the jungle and, being a yogi, even though I was in full on breakdown in the jungle. But my idea of my relationship to this other place was in my mind, even though it wasn't real because it wasn't where I was presently. The feeling I got when I thought about being somewhere else felt more alive than where I was presently. So my relationship to where I was disconnected. There was something there that just wasn't allowing me to just see who I was and the power that existed within planting myself, no matter where it was, and be in relationship to that. So I think that the cue that we get when we're in relationship or we're desiring or we're writing down, this is what we want and what we desire in a relationship, is just, asking that question is like, how do I want to feel in relationship to life itself, to where I am now, and then let that ripple out into that more intimate interaction with another being or another person. And we're all, my challenge personally in intimate relating or bringing in a partner was to understand my role within that understanding, that internal relationship I was having, and then wanting the structure of the masculine to be able to take care of all of these other things. But I wasn't willing to surrender that as much as I wanted it. I wasn't able to surrender it so that they could fully help me in supporting my creative process. It was there, but I wasn't fully receiving it because of my own concept of my own self-worth and how vulnerable I was willing to be, how expressive. Every relationship that I had been in, I was afraid to truly express myself in the entirety of who I think I have become. So, which told me, even though I desired a partner, there was aspects of myself showing up in that relationship that continue to, as I'm pulling back my own internal relationship and finding harmony within that. So it's not a concrete thing. I mean, we can put it on a vision board all we want of an idea or a concept of what we think a relationship, should look like. But we have to look at that vision board and say, am I willing to actually be all of these things?
Am I willing to surrender?
Yeah. Am I willing to let this in? And if I'm not, then let's talk about that. Let's go there. Let's see what would happen if I did.
So tell me the medicine hat thing. How did you surrender? What was the big surrender to allow you to start to actually enjoy being where you are?
It was funny. It's funny now. It was funny then. It was a bit humbling, actually. I had lived, when I first moved here, I was in a really difficult space. I was going through a dark night of the, I'm calling it a dark night of the soul, but I was going through like psychosis and not able to make decisions easily. I didn't want to be here, so I was looking for like the next exit out. I was living with my mom and, being caught up in my stepdad and my mom's relationship. And interestingly, like as I look back, I understand why I ended up at my mom's place, because there was lots of healing that needed to happen from between her and I. So that was one resentment I had, was that I actually had to face that. And the second was that I was not where I wanted, where I thought, where I had dreamt about being. I was in like the complete opposite situation that I ever thought I would end up. And I would walk every day. I just like, my body needed to move every day. So I would walk, and I would, in my head, I would just be like, just kind of coping, I think, through constructing my thoughts into poetry and song, and just finding ways to understand my own internal dialogue when I was walking or running. And I kept hearing myself say, like, I don't want to be here. 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 I want to be somewhere else. And then one day I just, like, whatever it was in me, a higher part of myself, it just, like, it stopped me in my tracks. And all I heard was this big voice that said, if you want to go, then go. And I'm like, oh, you mean, oh shit, I have a choice. And I saw the hamster wheel that for the first time, that it was like a child being like, I want to go, but the parent saying, like, you have to stay and you don't have a choice, and we put you here. And my parents did put me in medicine hat. My dad had bought me a ticket, because like a flight to come here, to come to my mom, so that I would heal and then I could come back, because he was scared. My dad, my whole persona shifted when I came back from Thailand, and he thought he lost his daughter, and I was losing myself. I too was just as scared, but he was like, I'm buying you this ticket. You're going to Medicine Hat. You're going to see your mom, and then you're going to get better. And then you can come back so that I feel better. Right. Mm-hmm. And, so that's literally what the little girl in me was feeling, was that I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. And then that moment where I had that realization that this is a choice that I get to make, I'm not being told to do this, came in. And then, one day at a time, once I really heard it, and I'm sure I heard that more than once before that moment, but for whatever reason, that moment just, like, it hit me. And then I ended up getting, a job at a spa, just doing, pedicures and manicures, even though I wanted to be doing Thai massage. And then it evolved into doing work and actually helping other people. And that was part of my healing process too, was just being of service to other people with the talents and skills that I had. And then I started meeting, I met Jo, who now runs Nirvana 101, and she started meditations at her house, and suddenly these people start showing up in my reality that I was telling myself there's nobody here that understands me. And then that one shift of my belief in that moment shifted my reality. Now I let it in, and all of these people and all these opportunities, that my soul was like, come on, like, you can be anywhere, and these people are going to be here because you are everywhere, right? Started showing up, but I had to make that decision. As soon as I chose, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be here. If I can make it in Medicine Hat, I can make it anywhere. And that was the moment that life really shifted for me. So that message has come through, and I've had to remind myself of that more and more and more often. Anytime that I'm finding myself wanting to escape where I am, as opposed to choose to be somewhere else. Yeah.
I think I met you shortly after that.
Probably, yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. I met a lot of people after that moment. Yeah.
So, one other thing I've been wondering is, in your clientele, what's the most common hurdle they have today?
I'm gonna say a sense of belonging, which is very parallel to my own journey. And it's interesting. It's not just, I mean, most of my clientele are like my mom's age. They're in their 50s and 60s. But I do get the odd woman in their 20s and 30s and 40s. But, if I look at it, there's such a core desire for community in some respect, like some form of like belonging so that you can be, or being your true self and then feeling like you belong to. Like the tribal mentality, feeling like you've got like people on your side, people who see you for who you are, and when you're being authentic to that, then you can receive the support that reflects that authenticity. So my clientele, I've actually recognized that a lot of people are coming to me too who are in transition, and my life is full of transition, and I don't think that every day is completely different than the one before. There might be some routine, but I've had to fully surrender to understanding graceful transition just every day. Every time I wake up, I'm like, how am I showing up today? Trusting the unfolding and not getting too caught up in my head. So that's where I find, I guess in the last year or two, I've been finding that has been kind of a core need for the clients I'm seeing and the students that are showing up, is this sense of belonging and community, and helping them gracefully transition with support in their evolution and in their awakening process to who they really are, and finding that joy and finding that playfulness, finding their way to enjoy their relationships in their life. And so it consistently is an invitation for me to keep being graceful with myself in that as well. So that's, I would say, if I were to categorize it the most, it would be in that department.
Yeah. And that's exactly where you're experiencing the same kind of expansion yourself too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Well, we are about at the last stage of this journey, and I guess the last question is, do you feel you have any limitations that you're not willing at this point to work through? See the ones that pop up in the mind and you're like, nope, not yet.
I don't know if that I'm not willing to see them, but I think they definitely challenge me they still challenge me, is making decisions around relationships, past, relating, present, possible future. There's this part in me in relationship that has been really shaky when it comes to commitment. So it's not that I don't want to see that limitation, but there is a part that just sees it. Like I know that there's a fear there around what commitment fully looks like and how I want that to be, how I want that to be. And instead of it being like this project that I need to conquer, I think I'm just in that place of awareness and committing myself to smaller things and to things that aren't, so absolute, I'll say. As I think that's just an innate limitation that is always going to come up for me with this desire for freedom, and the understanding of it is to understand the importance of commitment and how that can create freedom, as opposed to the commitment limiting my freedom. That's been a big one.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So my creative mind has a question. If God said that every person on earth was to become mute and not be able to speak, but Farren, you had the last sentence to say, or the last statement to be spoken, what would it be?
You are who you think you are.
That's not a simple statement to put in to accept.
Nope.
No.
No, it's not simple. The mind is not simple until it's simple. And if we couldn't speak, we would be with our mind. That's all we have. So, yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think?
That's interesting. Yesterday, I'm part of a group that's doing life story. So we have dinner, and then one person tells their entire life story, and I've done it before with a coach, and that took about 3 hours at that time, and a lot of stuff came up, a lot of old traumas and different things, and left me in an uncomfortable place afterwards.
Mm.
And so in this group, I've been listening to people tell their life story, younger people than me, different life stories, all very interesting and beautiful to listen to. And yesterday I got picked, and I think it was about 3 hours I shared, and I mean, I didn't share everything, and everything flowed. Everything that came out is what I think needed to come out, and how I felt, lots of emotional stuff I went through, lots of old, limiting events that caused me to think a certain way or have certain beliefs. I just explored so many things, so many positive things too. And I got home and I couldn't sleep. I was just like wired, absolutely wired, like wide awake. And this is like midnight. And today I woke up and I feel so clear. I feel like all these burdens are gone. And I feel a lot more I feel a lot more present, a lot more in myself, a lot more, I don't know what the word is, but yeah, I feel grateful for the opportunity to have a voice and to be able to use it, and to be able to speak freely and have people accept whatever comes out. That was great.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's important to be heard. And I find when I tell my stories, just as I've done today, there's so much, I'm observing what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Just catching some interesting keys around what's happening presently in my life. It never ceases to amaze me at the power of conversation and observation to create that clarity and to just bring voice to those things in a place that there's no there's no fixing, or there's no need to take it anywhere really, but it will take itself when observed in a place that it can just be exactly what it is. Because I'll speak personally, but that where I find my clarity is through conversation and listening to myself talk. And of course I listen to others talk because of that. I try to hold that space. I do my best to hold that space for people to observe their own process. And it's amazing the things, to see the unfolding as just in the observation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can thank you enough for joining me today. It's been a very, very huge honor to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And it feels like you're right here. It's interesting.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's amazing. It's the portal of technology has humbled me in how close we actually are, regardless of how far of a distance physically we are. We are connected always.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
This podcast is Expansion Cast. Thank you for listening.